Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant Eric Shun. I'm a graduate of Kings Point, a naval officer serving in special duty in the United States Merchant Marine. And I'm here today to discuss the issue of Admiralty, quote unquote, or military courts here in the United States, where the executive branch, the quote unquote unitary executive, is now carrying on literal military tribunals of American civilians here in the United States and has been doing it for the last 5 years. That goes to military dictatorship, and that goes to the elections coming up at the end of this year and into inauguration next year. Keep yourself posted as to what's going on, because this is a pivotal year for the young republic. The most recent proceedings, May 20th to the 23rd, 2008, at the Fusion Center in Long Beach, California, carried on by Homeland Security, United States Coast Guard, against myself. And I'm going to analyze and go through some of the things and pick out in here that makes it very clear that this is a military court of an alleged civilian. This is volume 1, page 1, and this is from the May 20th, 2008, the very first day of the proceedings. The U.S. Coast Guard is the complainant. And the Coast Guard, if you go on their own website, it's www.uscg.mil. .mil is reserved for branches of the military. On the heading here, it says United States of America, United States Department of Homeland Security, and U.S. Coast Guard. And then as the respondent or the defendant, it has my name, Eric Norman Shine. On the very first page as well, it also has the name of the administrative law judge, and it shows that his offices are in California, in Long Beach, in room 5150 at 501 West Ocean Boulevard. But then on the second page, it goes in and has his address also as 1 South Street, room 216, New York, New York, 10004. And when you look into this judge, quote unquote, he's not a judge, he's an executive branch hearing officer. They're supposed to be investigate, find out facts, take in information, any and all information. And what he is doing is acting or pretending to be a judge, although he is a member of the executive branch, like a police officer. It's like having a police officer pretend to be a judge. In here as well, on behalf of the Coast Guard, they have a Lieutenant Commander Christopher Triboulet, attorney at law, as the prosecutor, and he's a JAG officer, Judge Advocate General Officer, Corps officer for the Coast Guard. His address is Coast Guard Island up in Alameda, California, and his email address is at, and I'm not going to give out the whole thing for whatever purposes, but it's at uscg.mil. And then, of course, it has myself as the respondent. When you start to go through these proceedings, Mr. Triboulet identifies himself on page 4 as Christopher Triboulet for the United States Coast Guard. He does not give his rank, and I object, and I say, this is myself, it's Lieutenant Commander Triboulet. I want to be correct on the record. And then Lieutenant Triboulet, it's identified in here as Lieutenant Triboulet, not Lieutenant Commander Triboulet. The court reporter made some errors. He says, sir, that is correct, Lieutenant Commander, United States Coast Guard. And then I identify myself as Lieutenant Eric Shine, United States Navy, graduated from Kings Point in 1991. This goes into, the court even says here on page 5, this is not a military proceeding. Well, if the military is involved and the military is doing it, the judge himself is an ex-lieutenant commander or current, he may be building upon his pension, lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard. The prosecutor is a lieutenant commander JAG officer in the Coast Guard. They had me as an alleged civilian. They're not alleging that I'm a naval officer, which would be inappropriate. The Coast Guard wouldn't have any authority. They're alleging that I am a civilian and carrying on these proceedings in their own court that they created, that they pay for, that they fund. The attorney assisting the administrative law judge, quote unquote, or military law judge, Lieutenant Commander Brodzinski, Walter J. Brodzinski, and there's important notes about this person as well. The assistant, John C. Johns, is ex-Marine Corps, an attorney himself, so they have an attorney there in John C. Johns, an attorney, former Virginia prosecutor, as the judge, administrative law judge or military law judge, presiding over a case against a civilian. The prosecutor, a Coast Guard JAG officer. The judge is ex-lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard, an attorney himself, and he sat in on the 9/11 trust fund cases where they held as much money in the trust fund away from the families that were injured under Special Master Kenneth Feinberg. And Special Master Kenneth Feinberg was appointed as a Special Master by the executive branch, and a Special Master is supposed to be appointed by the judicial branch, by, like, say, the Circuit Appellate Court. He's basically an investigating officer. He's much like a shipping commissioner. And instead, even this court is claiming its authority under the Shipping Commissioners Act of 1871, which is 46 U.S.C. 239. And the shipping commissioners were actual federal officers, judicial officers from the judicial court, appointed by the district court to go out and protect seamen to make sure that they were not being shanghaied and or put into indentured servitude on board these ships. These transcripts also go into, I want to read this part, make sure I get this out. This is actually a section from, this is page 48 of the transcripts from May. And it's kind of an opening statement that was read into the court or said into the court. I apologize for not being better prepared for my opening statement, but I didn't even know I was going to have an opening statement because a lot of these rules and stuff aren't published. But I did not get timely notice in calendar as to these proceedings. I only found out today that they're supposed to go for 4 days long. They noticed it for 1 day and then it was held for 4 days. I think anyone could understand the disruption in your own schedule and work. And even as to having witnesses there, and when you try to defend yourself against a branch of the military. Let me continue. I've had little or no help as far as preparation, especially coming from the Coast Guard as to service, subpoenas, or issue of subpoenas. I have been disallowed any right to witnesses. I've been disallowed any right to exhibits. I'm representing myself as an alleged civilian, and I didn't allege it, they're alleging that I'm a civilian, against a special branch of the military. And I did serve on the court in Coast Guard prosecution. It's a document by the Human Rights Watch, I believe. Here it is. It's Amnesty International. It's called, quote unquote, Document USA, Justice Delayed and Justice Denied, Trials under the Military Commissions Act. And I want to be very clear because, and let me break real quick on what was being read into the record. The Military Commissions Act is being applied not overseas and not in Guantanamo, but right here in the United States, and supplanting the Administrative Procedure Act to where branches of the military can now supposedly adjudicate civilian affairs. And this is a battle that's been long, fought since dating back to the Magna Carta, and has been fought here in the United States under the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and now this war, quote unquote, or armed conflict in Iraq. There's case law, U.S. Supreme Court case, Reed versus Covert, which was cited in here, that bars or prevents the military from using assets, just like Tiananmen Square and the Chinese using a tank against civilians there and running over some people and injuring a lot, killing some. A military asset or resource, whether it's a tank, a bazooka, a rifle, or the personnel behind that rifle, or a JAG officer and or a court that's been set up by a branch of military, is not supposed to be targeted or used against civilians, especially our own civilians here in the United States. That goes to martial law, that goes to military rule, that goes to military dictatorship. Let me continue. It's a document by the Human Rights Watch, I believe. Here it is. It's Amnesty International. It's called, quote, Document USA, justice delayed and justice denied. Trials under the Military Commissions Act. United States of America, justice delayed and justice denied. It goes into much of what I've been saying, that this court is a military tribunal, a military court. It's trying to involve itself in civilian affairs. I'm on page 49 now of the transcripts. During the Civil War, after Lincoln had violated the Constitution and carried on military trials of civilians and also suspended habeas corpus, the Supreme Court upheld that military commissions of civilians were improper and that his suspension of habeas corpus was also improper. In World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, there's a famous case, Reed versus Covert. It's a 1956 and 1957 that goes to where the Supreme Court has ruled that military commissions are unconstitutional and actually went all the way back to the 1957 Reed hearing. It's the only time that a case has been overturned on rehearing by the Supreme Court. It was originally heard in 1956, reheard in 1957, and they went all the way back to the Magna Carta and said why the civilians will always be in control of the military and the military shall never be in control of the civilians. And I'm continuing on here. They went all the way back to the Magna Carta and showed why the military should not have anything to do with civilian affairs, and that the military shall never control civilian affairs, and that civilians shall always control the military. This is being read into the record in these proceedings, and they ignore it. And they're, you got uniformed officers, JAG officers, lieutenant commanders. And if I had not stated into the written record, the transcripts, that they were in officers' uniforms within the court, you would not see that because it's not audio-visually taped, as is this show. In these proceedings, lieutenant commander is now using a branch of military and its assets and resources and targeting an alleged American civilian. Whether the lieutenant wishes to declare me to be a veteran as a naval officer, which I dispute, because of the way these proceedings have come about, that is egregious. In here, and I'm going on to page 50 now, and what has been going on for the last 5 years. Remember, they brought charges against me in March 6th of 2003, this newfound special branch of military in the Coast Guard, Homeland Security, and I continue. He's been prosecuting a veteran, quote unquote, for being depressed. Those were the charges. I would go on. There are other Supreme Court case law that prevents the military from getting involved in civilian affairs and adjudicating civilian affairs. I will go ahead and rest on that opening, Your Honor. And going into this, you start to see that not only the court ignores the environment that it is in, the judge, he was confronted on this about him being, because it was discovered through other individuals, that he's a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard, which goes to conflicts of interest. It's like having General Electric, an individual works for General Electric, becomes a judge, and a case comes before him involving General Electric. He's supposed to recuse himself automatically. It's not even supposed to be demanded. But we've also seen how Justice Anton Scalia has done the very same thing involving the Cheney Energy Committee, to where he tried to separate the personal issues, the friendship that he had with Cheney, and the public or professional situation of Cheney and the Energy Task Force and his position as a vice president, and Scalia's position as a U.S. Supreme Court justice. You also have to look at Anton Scalia is also a big advocate of the Administrative Procedure Act, or the corruption of it. His father was the president of the American Fascist Society. And so you start to see all the threads, and if you read Naomi Klein's book, Shock Doctrine, you get a good understanding. But I ask here at page 233 in the transcripts from the May 2008 proceedings, this is myself, Mr. Shine, are you a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard, or were you? And this is directed at the judge, the court. You don't voir dire the judge, Mr. Shine. That was about the motion for recusal, and you didn't allow it to be heard in the proceeding. He's supposed to allow an affirmative hearing on the issues of motion for recusal, and he denied that and would not go into the issues. And then he covers up the fact that he's a lieutenant commander, wouldn't answer the question, and this is going on since he took over the case almost a year and a half prior to this. Finally, as he is pushed, he admits on the next page, the court goes on, Mr. Schein, the same article, he's talking about an article that he wrote that was in the motion for recusal, was published in a journal called the Criminal Justice Journal. Mr. Schein, exactly. I'm being treated like a criminal, like I did something wrong, like I broke a law. The court, do you know what the Criminal Justice Journal is for, Mr. Schein? Mr. Schein, what have I done wrong? What rule have I broken? The court, never mind. The issue, because I was a prosecutor, I wrote law review articles, therefore I should be recused, and that was only part of why he should be recused. He was not only covering up the fact that he was a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard previously, but a great deal of other information involving the 9/11 Trust Fund, his position as to the unitary executive and more, and corruptions that he had been involved in. There was actual congressional testimony targeted at him by former ALJs about him having ex-parte communications, which is disallowed. Mr. Schein, it wasn't just about that. It was about 110 pages long, and I'm talking about the motion for recusal. The court, there was nothing in that that was relevant. It was overruled. The fact that, Mr. Schein, and you still won't admit that you were a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard. I again confront him, and this is after a year and a half. He finally says, the court, I was a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard. And when you think about conflicts of interest, that it's a Coast Guard court, Coast Guard prosecutor, they pay for the court, they pay the judge, they pay the prosecutor. They basically have others paying for the outcome of these courts because they're using it in a fascist way as a drumhead court, as a false flag court, taking people not only from the National Marine Fisheries, but from the Merchant Marine, and not just crew, but officers, not knowing what these proceedings are or all about, or what the true nature of them is, or how fixed it is, and bringing them in there, making them think that they're getting due process, that they're going before a judge, and he's not a judge. There's a testimony that was filed in relation to this where a Professor Dash, and he has no knowledge of or expertise on these type of proceedings, or Admiralty or General Maritime. He worked for the banks as an administrator. He went before Congress and testified that they, by changing the name from hearing officer to where they're supposed to have a hearing and hear the facts and take it in and make sure that this kind of problem doesn't pop up in the future, it's supposed to be remedial administrator. It's not supposed to take any rights or property or life or liberty away from any citizens, and they've been converted into these military courts now. He goes in, I even say after this, he says, I was a lieutenant commander in the Coast Guard. And I say, why hide it? Be proud of it. The court, it has no bearing on these proceedings. It has no bearing on doing anything. And Mr. Schein, that's your opinion. I didn't know. Were you or were you not? So then the conflicts of interest become very clear, where the judge, like having an individual who used to work for General Electric, or better yet, worked for General Electric and then became a prosecutor or a defense counsel for General Electric, then becomes a judge and then sits on a case involving General Electric. And any and all conflicts of interest are supposed to be averted. The Congress, there's been congressional testimony back in 2007 by Judge Massey and Judge Denson. He tries to skirt the issue in here about the testimony. It was targeted at him by Judge Massey. Judge Denson, I don't believe, spoke about Judge Brzezinski specifically. But this court, this entire court, it's not just about his conflicts and him being a former or even current, because he still works for the Coast Guard, but now he's a civilian working for the Coast Guard, when he was a former lieutenant commander working for the Coast Guard. So they think somehow by just changing the title, they wipe out conflicts of interest, which is just not the case. But then they're carrying this on literally as a military court, an Admiralty court, a military tribunal, military commission of a quote-unquote alleged civilian. And I'm not the only one that they've done this to. And if you go into the, and the judge in here, he goes, here's one example. it's unbelievable. And I try to keep my demeanor. And remember, I am in a military court as an alleged civilian, which means you could be within these proceedings next. Unless you do something, contact your congressman, contact your senators, contact them both or all of them. You probably have, one congressman, obviously, and a couple of senators. Beyond that, you need to contact the Coast Guard itself, the Admiral, write letters to the Coast Guard, write letters to the Coast Guard and Marine Transportation Subcommittee and the parent committee within the House and the Senate to make sure that these proceedings are stopped. The Government Accountability Office is looking into this now. You can make all the difference in the world for your future to make sure that military courts are not used upon you and or your children, to where not only does the military control civilians and carry on, it's like having the Department of Motor Vehicles or the Highway Patrol turned into a branch of military overnight, and then not only having the Highway Patrol carry on their own courts where they sit in all roles, but you're presumed guilty, and this goes to taking money and fines and putting the money wherever they want, and a form of taxation, much like we suffered under the rule coming from England. And much of this is coming from the European Union, England, Austria, Bavaria, Germany, Italy, Spain, and these very ancient old world families like the Habsburgs, Thyssen, Krupp, and others, Zeppelin is another one as well, who are corporatists. They are taking things like, a good example of this is just-in-time manufacturing, where you use, and Ford and others, where you use outsourcing to some extent to, say you're manufacturing a car and you don't want to make the tires anymore, or you spin it off and start another company and let one of your heir apparents take over this company making the tires. You do it off the assembly line, off the facility for the assembly. You get the tires just in time to put them on the car and assemble the car, so that you do not warehouse a bunch of tires in the main assembly facility, and you don't have a backlog. You actually get it from the supplier when you need them, just in time. And they're taking these very same corporate philosophies and trying to apply them to government, like FEMA, to where, oh, we have a hurricane, we don't have any civil servants working or who are being prepared, or a very limited corps. We go out and hire them when the hurricane hits. Well, at some point it's too late, because water, tractors, generators, training, all sorts of things need to be in preparation, civil defense. All of these things are being taken down. They are being taken down intentionally. They are being sent out of the country, just like our National Guard, fire trucks, firefighting equipment. You can go down the whole long laundry list. All of the National Guard equipment as well is being moved out of the country, not only so that they can produce and make a bunch more and replenish this, but also it goes to levels of control. This war in Iraq, this war in Afghanistan is all about this. It's an open conduit going both ways, into and out of this country. It is breaking down civil defense. It is breaking down national security. Our courts are being sequestered, are being fortified from the American civilian to where we can't get in. If you go into a federal building now, you are frisked, you are stripped, well, not strip searched, but you are searched by a private corporation that registers you for going into that public facility. That's like going into a library to where the FBI can get your library records. And you have to understand that issue of library records is not about what you read in a library, it's what you have on your computer. And when you start to look at, and I brought this up in another show about the German connections here, T-Mobile is a German corporation. When you think of warrantless wiretapping and any call that goes from the United States, from a US citizen out of the country and back in, because it's a two-way communication, obviously. It wouldn't be communication unless it's coming back in. T-Mobile is outside the United States. T in T-Mobile stands for telecom with a K. It is a German corporation, and it's not the only one. ICANN, which is the International Corporation for Addresses, Names, and Numbers, it's based in California, but it's being moved to Belgium. When you look at the International Criminal Court and a recent ruling that was put out, not only the ICC, things that are based in The Hague, like the tribunals that were carried out upon the Germans in World War II, much of this is retribution, payback, where Austrian, Bavarian, German, Italian, and even French and English handmaidens, for want of a better word, who are working for these royal families, again, like the Habsburgs and others, Bourbons and more, are coming into and trying to recolonize the United States, dissolve our Declaration of Independence, dissolve our Constitution, dissolve the Republic, and they are doing this because the Department of Defense owns 66 million acres worldwide. If there is no more United States, that 66 million acres is up for grabs. And whoever turns off the lights to the Republic gets to decide where that 66 million acres goes. And it's not just the water and resources sitting on that land, timber, the little critters and creatures that are running around on it, or possibly the aquifer that is below it, like the land that President Bush supposedly or allegedly bought down in Paraguay. It is the gold, the uranium, the silver, the copper, the oil, and other resources that sits underneath that land, and also the strategic asset worldwide. If you read books like Naomi Klein, The Shock Doctrine, where the University of Chicago and the University of Berkeley have been turned into teaching grounds, teaching facilities for fascism or corporatism or feudalism, to where those who will serve the corporation, which is an extension of the royal families. Queen Elizabeth is related to the Habsburgs. George W. Bush is related to the Habsburgs as well through Queen Elizabeth. And you start to see, brought up before about the Ronald Reagan being knighted by the Queen, George H.W. Bush being knighted by the Queen, a whole long laundry list of others who have foreign royal ties, something that our founding fathers were adamantly against. Peace. Take care. Start thinking, start reading, get into action.